My lottery ticket scanner showed $10 million. The clerk said, "That's not yours anymore." I stared at the convenience store worker, my hand still gripping the winning ticket so hard the paper was starting to crumple. "What do you mean it's not mine? I just scanned it. $10 million. The machine literally just displayed the amount." The clerk, a middle-aged woman named Patricia according to her name tag, was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not sympathy, not excitement, something closer to pity, mixed with discomfort. "Sir, I need you to stay calm. This ticket was reported stolen 3 days ago. The Lottery Commission flagged it in the system." My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Stolen? I bought this ticket myself at a gas station in Phoenix 2 weeks ago. I have the receipt in my wallet." I fumbled for my wallet with shaking hands, dropping credit cards on the counter as I searched for proof that this was my ticket, my win, my escape from the construction job that was destroying my back, and the apartment with the leaking ceiling that I couldn't afford to fix. Patricia held up her hand, and I noticed she'd already pressed something under the counter. "Sir, I've already called the police. They're on their way to sort this out. If you really bought this ticket legitimately, you'll be able to prove it and everything will be fine." But her tone suggested she didn't believe that would be the case. My mind was racing through the past 2 weeks, trying to remember every detail about buying that ticket. I'd stopped at a Shell station on my way home from a job site, paid cash for $20 in random quick picks, stuffed them in my glove compartment without checking them. It wasn't until last night that I'd finally gone through my old tickets, scanning each one on my phone app, not expecting anything until that one ticket made my phone screen light up with numbers that seemed impossible. $10 million. The kind of money that would change everything. Let me quit my job, pay off my debts, maybe even reconcile with my ex-wife who'd left because I could never provide the stability she wanted. "Look, there's obviously been some kind of mistake," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I didn't steal anything. I'm just a construction worker who bought a lottery ticket. This is my ticket." Patricia wasn't making eye contact anymore, and I noticed other customers in the store were starting to stare. 2 police officers walked through the door within 5 minutes, which seemed impossibly fast unless they'd been nearby already. "Sir, I'm Officer Davis, and this is Officer Thompson. We need you to come with us to answer some questions about the lottery ticket you're trying to claim." The taller officer, Davis, had his hand resting on his belt near his weapon, not threatening but definitely ready. "Am I under arrest?" My voice came out higher than I intended, because I haven't done anything wrong. I bought this ticket legally and I can prove it. Officer Thompson, a younger guy who looked barely old enough to be a cop, pulled out a small notebook. "Can you tell us where and when you purchased this specific ticket?" I explained about the Shell station in Phoenix, about buying multiple tickets 2 weeks ago on a Wednesday evening after work. I was covered in drywall dust, paid with a $20 bill, didn't get a receipt because the printer was broken. The attendant was a young kid, maybe college age, with a tattoo on his forearm. The details were coming back now, triggered by adrenaline and desperation. Officer Davis was writing everything down, but his expression remained skeptical. "The problem, Mr. He paused, waiting for my name. "Sullivan. Michael Sullivan." I pulled out my driver's license with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. "The problem, Mr. Sullivan, is that this ticket was reported stolen from a residence in Scottsdale 3 days ago. The owner filed a police report claiming someone broke into his home and took several lottery tickets from his office, including this winning ticket." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible. I bought this ticket 2 weeks ago, a week and a half before it was supposedly stolen. How could I steal something I already owned?" Officer Thompson exchanged a glance with his partner that I couldn't interpret. "The homeowner claims he purchased this ticket 4 weeks ago and was storing it in his home office. He checks his tickets regularly and knew this one was a winner before it was stolen." The story didn't make sense, and I said so. If he knew it was a winner, why didn't he claim it immediately? Why leave a $10 million ticket sitting in his office for weeks? Davis closed his notebook. "That's what we're trying to figure out. Right now, we have 2 people claiming ownership of the same winning ticket. You're going to need to come down to the station and make a formal statement." I looked at Patricia, who was still standing behind the counter watching this unfold. "Can you at least put the ticket somewhere safe? I don't want it disappearing while we sort this out." She nodded and placed it in an envelope, sealing it carefully and writing something on the outside. "The Lottery Commission will hold it in escrow until the ownership dispute is resolved." At the police station, I was placed in an interview room that smelled like stale coffee and desperation. A detective named Sarah Chen entered 20 minutes later carrying a thick file folder. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm going to be straight with you. The man claiming you stole his ticket is Lawrence Whitmore. He's a prominent real estate developer in Scottsdale, sits on the city council, and has a lot of credibility in this community." She opened the folder and showed me a police report filed 3 days ago. He reported a break-in at his home, said nothing was taken except lottery tickets from his office. He provided purchase records showing he bought tickets at various locations over the past month, including the winning ticket you're claiming is yours. The documentation looked official. Receipts with timestamps, security camera footage from a different gas station showing Whitmore buying tickets, even a statement from his wife confirming the tickets were kept in his office. "This doesn't prove anything," I said, though doubt was starting to creep in. "Those receipts could be for different tickets. How do we know one of them corresponds to my winning ticket?" Detective Chen leaned back in her chair, studying my face carefully. "That's the question, isn't it? The Lottery Commission is running the serial number on your ticket now to trace its sale history. If it was sold at the Shell station in Phoenix 2 weeks ago like you claim, that will support your story. If it was sold at a different location 4 weeks ago, that supports Whitmore's claim. She paused. The problem is that the Shell station you mentioned had a fire last week. Their records from the past month were destroyed, including point-of-sale data and security footage. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. Let me guess. The fire happened after Whitmore reported his ticket stolen? Chen nodded slowly. 3 days ago. Same day as his police report. Fire investigator ruled it accidental. Faulty wiring in the back office. But you're right that the timing raises questions. I leaned forward, pressing my hands flat on the table to stop them from shaking. Detective, I'm a construction worker who makes $40,000 a year. I drive a truck that's older than some of my coworkers. I live in an apartment where the landlord won't fix the plumbing. Do I look like someone who has the resources or connections to burn down a gas station to cover my tracks? You look like someone who might be desperate enough to take a big risk if the payoff was $10 million, Chen said. But her tone wasn't accusatory. She was stating a fact, playing devil's advocate. The question is whether that desperation led you to break into Whitmore's house or whether someone is setting you up. The words hung in the air between us. Why would someone set me up? But even as I asked, possibilities were forming in my mind. Chen tapped her pen against the folder. That's what I intend to find out. Tell me about your history with Lawrence Whitmore. Have you ever met him? Done any work for him? Have any connection to him at all? I shook my head, but then a memory surfaced that made my blood run cold. Wait, about 3 months ago, I was working on a renovation project in Scottsdale. Custom home. Really expensive. The contractor I was subbing for mentioned the owner was some big shot developer. I never met the owner directly, but I was there for about 2 weeks doing drywall and finish work. Chen's expression sharpened. Do you remember the address? I did, and when I told her, she wrote it down and left the room. 20 minutes later, she returned with a different expression, less skeptical, more concerned. That address belongs to Lawrence Whitmore. You worked on his house renovation 3 months ago. The pieces were starting to fit together in a pattern I didn't like. So Whitmore knows who I am, or at least could have seen me around his house. Is it possible he's using me as a scapegoat? Chen sat down across from me again. Here's what I think might have happened. Whitmore bought a winning lottery ticket and realized he had a problem. He's married, and Arizona is a community property state. If he claims this ticket while married, his wife gets half in any divorce. But if the ticket is stolen and someone else tries to claim it, he can dispute ownership, drag it out in court, maybe even arrange for the ticket to be invalidated entirely until he can get a divorce finalized. My head was spinning. But why frame me specifically? Why not just report it stolen without naming anyone? Detective Chen pulled out more documents. Because you're perfect. You worked in his house, so you had access. You're working class, struggling financially, exactly the type of person a jury would believe might commit theft for $10 million. And you bought lottery tickets around the same time, which makes the conflicting claims more plausible. This is insane, I said, but the logic was sound in a twisted way. So what do I do? How do I prove the ticket is mine when the only evidence was destroyed in a convenient fire? Chen's expression suggested she was asking herself the same question. We need to find something that proves you bought that specific ticket at that specific time. A witness, a credit card record, anything that establishes your presence at that Shell station on the day you claim you bought it. I racked my brain for details. I paid cash, so no credit card record. But I remember there was another customer there, an older man who was buying cigarettes and complained about the price. And the kid behind the counter had a specific tattoo. It was a phoenix rising from flames on his forearm. If we can find that employee, he might remember me. Chen made notes. The Shell station owner should have employee records even if the point-of-sale data was destroyed. We'll track down everyone who was working that day. She stood up. In the meantime, you're free to go, but don't leave town. And Mr. Sullivan, if you're lying to me, if you did break into Whitmore's house, now would be the time to come clean. I looked her straight in the eye. Detective, I'm a lot of things. I'm broke, I'm divorced, I'm tired, and I'm one bad break away from losing everything. But I'm not a thief. That ticket is mine, and I'm not going to let some rich asshole steal my one chance at a better life. Chen nodded, and something in her expression suggested she believed me. Over the next week, I tried to continue with normal life, but everything felt surreal. I went to work, swinging a hammer and hanging drywall while knowing I was either a millionaire or about to be charged with burglary. My coworkers had heard about the ticket. News travels fast in small circles, and their reactions ranged from excitement to suspicion. Did you really win $10 million? My friend Carlos asked during lunch break. Or did you do something stupid? I explained the situation, watching his expression change from curiosity to concern. Man, that's messed up. But if this Whitmore guy is rich and connected, he's got lawyers. What do you got? The question haunted me, because the answer was nothing. I had nothing except the truth, and I was learning that truth wasn't always enough. Detective Chen called me on a Wednesday morning while I was replacing ceiling tiles in an office building. We found the Shell station employee. His name is Dylan Martinez, 22 years old, college student working part-time. He remembers you. My heart started pounding. He does? Chen's voice was cautiously optimistic. He remembers a customer matching your description coming in late afternoon, covered in work dust, buying lottery tickets with a 20. He specifically remembers because you made a joke about finally winning enough to retire, and he said everyone says that. He also remembers the lottery machine printer was broken that day, which is why you didn't get a receipt. Relief flooded through me so intensely I had to sit down on a stack of drywall. So that proves I was there. That proves I bought tickets that day. But Chen's next words tempered my excitement. It proves you were at that Shell station and bought lottery tickets. It doesn't prove you bought that specific winning ticket. Whitmore's lawyers are arguing that you could have bought multiple tickets that day at multiple locations, and one of those locations could have been wherever Whitmore claims he bought the winning ticket. The legal maneuvering was making my head hurt. So even with a witness, I still can't prove the ticket is mine? Chen sighed audibly. The Lottery Commission is bringing in a forensic examiner to look at the ticket itself. Sometimes they can determine information from the paper, the ink, the serial number pattern that might indicate where and when it was sold, but it's not an exact science. I thanked her and ended the call, feeling the hope drain away as quickly as it had arrived. That evening, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Sullivan, this is Richard Keller. I'm an attorney, and I'd like to discuss your lottery situation. My first instinct was to hang up, assuming this was one of Whitmore's lawyers trying to intimidate me, but Keller quickly clarified. I represent a group of attorneys who specialize in lottery disputes. We work on contingency, meaning we only get paid if you win. I've been following your case, and I believe you're being railroaded by Lawrence Whitmore. The validation from a professional felt like oxygen after drowning. How did you hear about my case? Keller chuckled. Mr. Sullivan, a $10 million lottery dispute involving a city councilman is news. It's been in the papers. Most people assume you're a thief trying to claim someone else's winnings, but I've done some research into Lawrence Whitmore, and this isn't the first time he's been involved in questionable financial situations. Over the next hour, Keller laid out everything he'd discovered about Whitmore. 3 previous business partners who'd sued him for fraud, 2 ex-wives who'd accused him of hiding assets during divorce proceedings, a pattern of behavior that suggested Whitmore was willing to bend or break rules when significant money was at stake. My theory, Keller explained, is that Whitmore did buy a winning lottery ticket, but he's in the middle of a contentious divorce with his 3rd wife. If he claims the ticket now, she gets half, $5 million. But if the ticket is tied up in a legal dispute for the next year or two while he finalizes his divorce, he might be able to claim it later as separate property acquired after the marriage ended. The cynicism was breathtaking. So he's willing to destroy my life to protect his money from his wife? Keller's laugh was bitter. Mr. Sullivan, you'd be amazed what wealthy people will do to avoid sharing their wealth. The question is whether we can prove it. He laid out a legal strategy that involved not just defending against Whitmore's theft allegations, but going on the offense, challenging his claims, and digging into his finances to establish a motive for fraud. This is going to get ugly, Keller warned. Whitmore has resources and connections. He'll try to destroy your credibility, dig up every mistake you've ever made, paint you as a desperate criminal. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my life, my failed marriage, my bankruptcy from 8 years ago, my DUI from my 20s that I'd spent a decade living down. All of it would be dragged out and displayed publicly. I don't have a choice, I said finally. If I give up now, I'm admitting I'm a thief. I'll probably go to jail, and even if I don't, I'll never be able to show my face in this town again. At least if I fight, there's a chance I'll win. Keller's approval was audible in his tone. That's what I was hoping you'd say. I'll file a formal claim with the Lottery Commission and prepare a civil suit against Whitmore for defamation and fraud. This is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. The lawsuit was filed 2 days later, and that's when things got really nasty. Whitmore's lawyers filed a counterclaim accusing me of burglary, fraud, and conspiracy. They subpoenaed my phone records, my bank statements, my employment history. They interviewed my ex-wife, who they somehow convinced to give a statement about my financial desperation and willingness to take risks. My ex-wife Rachel called me after her deposition, her voice tight with guilt. Michael, I'm sorry. They twisted everything I said. I told them you were struggling financially, but that you'd never steal anything. And they made it sound like I was confirming you were capable of burglary. I couldn't even be angry at her because I understood how lawyers worked. It's fine, Rachel. I know you didn't mean to hurt me. There was a long pause. Do you really think you won that money? $10 million? The question hung between us, loaded with history. I know I did. I bought that ticket legally, and I'm not going to let Whitmore steal it from me just because he has better lawyers and more money. Rachel's sigh carried years of accumulated disappointment. You always were stubborn. I hope you're right, Michael. I really do. The call ended, and I sat in my apartment staring at the water stain on the ceiling that had been growing for months, thinking about how different my life could have been if I'd just checked that ticket immediately instead of letting it sit in my glove compartment for 2 weeks. The forensic examination of the lottery ticket took 6 weeks, and when the results came back, they were inconclusive. The examiner couldn't definitively determine where or when the ticket had been purchased based on the physical evidence alone. The serial number indicated it was part of a batch sold to multiple locations across Phoenix and Scottsdale during a 3-week period that covered both my claimed purchase date and Whitmore's claimed purchase date. In other words, the physical evidence didn't prove anything. Keller called me with the news, and I could hear the frustration in his voice. The good news is that it doesn't disprove your claim either. We're essentially at a stalemate, which means this is going to trial. A jury will have to decide who they believe. The thought of my fate being decided by 12 strangers was terrifying. What are our chances? Keller hesitated. Honestly, it's 50-50. Whitmore has credibility and resources, but he also has a motive to lie. You have Dylan's testimony that you bought tickets that day. but you can't prove which specific ticket was yours. It's going to come down to which story the jury finds more believable. The trial began on a Monday morning in late October, nearly 6 months after I'd scanned that ticket. The courtroom was packed with journalists, curious onlookers, and what I assumed were Whitmore's supporters, well-dressed people who looked at me like I was something they'd scraped off their expensive shoes. Whitmore himself sat at the plaintiff's table looking calm and confident, his silver hair perfectly styled, his suit probably worth more than my truck. He nodded at the judge like they were old friends, which they probably were. The jury selection took 2 days, with both sides fighting over every potential juror. Keller wanted working-class people who might identify with my situation. Whitmore's lawyers wanted wealthy professionals who would see me as a threat to property rights. In the end, we got a mix. 6 women, 6 men, ranging in age from 20s to 70s, representing various economic backgrounds. They would decide whether I was a millionaire or a criminal, and I couldn't read anything from their faces. Whitmore's lawyers went first, laying out a story of a hard-working, successful businessman who'd been victimized by a desperate construction worker with a gambling problem. The evidence will show that Mr. Sullivan had access to Mr. Whitmore's home during a renovation project. He knew the layout, knew where Mr. Whitmore kept valuable items, and he saw an opportunity. When Mr. Whitmore discovered his lottery tickets were missing and reported the theft, Mr. Sullivan panicked. But instead of disappearing, he got greedy. He thought he could claim the winning ticket and that no one would question a construction worker winning the lottery. The narrative was compelling and painted me as exactly the type of person who might commit opportunistic theft. Whitmore took the stand and told his story with practiced ease. He'd been buying lottery tickets for years, always kept them in his office, checked them regularly. When he'd scanned his tickets 2 days before the reported break-in, one had shown a $10 million win. I didn't claim it immediately because I wanted to consult with my financial advisor first about the tax implications and the best way to structure the winnings. Keller's cross-examination was brutal. Mr. Whitmore, isn't it true that you're currently in the middle of a divorce? Whitmore's composure cracked slightly. That's personal business. Keller pressed forward. Isn't it true that under Arizona community property law, any lottery winnings claimed during your marriage would be split 50-50 with your wife? Whitmore's lawyer objected, arguing relevance, but the judge allowed the question. Yes, that's technically true, but that's not why I delayed claiming the ticket. Keller pulled out financial documents. Isn't it also true that you've hidden assets during 2 previous divorces, according to court records from those proceedings? The objections were flying now, but the damage was done. The jury had seen that Whitmore had a pattern of financial manipulation and a strong motive to tie up the lottery winnings in legal disputes until his divorce was finalized. When Keller finished, Whitmore looked less like a victim and more like someone with something to hide. Then it was my turn to testify, and I'd never been so nervous in my life. Keller walked me through my story, buying the tickets at the Shell station, putting them in my glove compartment, forgetting about them until I'd checked them weeks later. Why didn't you check them immediately? Keller asked, knowing the question would come from the other side anyway. Honestly, because I've bought lottery tickets for years and never won anything. I'd kind of given up hope. I only checked them that night because I was cleaning out my truck and found a stack of old tickets. It was the truth, and it sounded pathetic even to my own ears. Whitmore's lawyers destroyed me on cross-examination. They brought up my bankruptcy, my divorce, my DUI from 15 years ago. They showed my bank statements with their pathetic balances and overdraft fees. Mr. Sullivan, isn't it true that you were facing eviction from your apartment 3 months ago? I admitted it was true. And isn't it true that you owed money to multiple creditors? Also true. So you were desperate for money, weren't you? They were painting a picture of desperation that the jury could see clearly. But then Keller called Dylan Martinez to the stand, and the young man's testimony was straightforward and credible. I remember him because he made a joke about finally winning enough to retire. We get a lot of customers buying lottery tickets, but I remembered him because he was covered in construction dust and seemed tired. He bought $20 worth of quick picks, and the receipt printer was broken, which I apologized for. Under cross-examination, Whitmore's lawyers tried to shake Dylan's testimony. Couldn't Mr. Sullivan have come in at a different time? Don't you see hundreds of customers every week? Dylan stood firm. I remember that specific day because it was my last shift before spring break. I remember the broken printer because my manager was annoyed about it. And I remember this customer specifically because of the joke and the dust. The testimony wasn't ironclad proof, but it supported my version of events. Keller then called a private investigator who'd interviewed the fire marshal about the Shell station fire. The fire marshal's report indicates that the wiring that caused the fire had been tampered with, possibly deliberately, though not enough evidence existed to rule it arson. However, the timing was suspicious. The fire occurred within hours of Mr. Whitmore's police report about the stolen ticket. Whitmore's lawyers fought back with character witnesses, business partners, charity board members, his pastor. They all testified that Lawrence Whitmore was a man of integrity who would never fabricate a theft claim for financial gain. The implicit message was clear. Who would you rather believe, a respected businessman and city councilman, or a bankrupt construction worker? The closing arguments came after 3 weeks of testimony. Whitmore's lawyers painted me as a desperate criminal who'd seized an opportunity. Keller painted Whitmore as a wealthy manipulator protecting his assets at my expense. The question you have to ask yourselves, Keller told the jury, is who has more to lose by telling the truth? Mr. Sullivan risks prison if he's lying. Mr. Whitmore risks splitting $10 million with his wife if he tells the truth. Who has the greater motive to lie? The jury deliberated for 4 days, which Keller said was a good sign. If they were sure you were guilty, they'd have decided quickly. The fact that they're taking their time means they're struggling with the evidence. When the verdict came back, I could barely breathe as the jury forewoman stood to read it. In the matter of the disputed lottery ticket, we find in favor of the plaintiff, Michael Sullivan. The courtroom erupted. Whitmore's face went red, and he was immediately surrounded by his lawyers. I sat in stunned silence until Keller grabbed my shoulder. "You won. The ticket is legally yours." But the victory was complicated because Whitmore immediately filed an appeal, and the Lottery Commission announced they would keep the ticket in escrow until all appeals were exhausted. "This could take another year," Keller warned. "Whitmore has the resources to drag this out indefinitely." I'd won the battle, but not yet the war, and I was exhausted from months of stress and legal fights. However, something unexpected happened 2 weeks after the verdict. Detective Chen called me with news that changed everything. Whitmore's wife filed for divorce the day after the verdict, and she subpoenaed all records related to the lottery ticket dispute. Her lawyers discovered something interesting. Chen explained that Whitmore's wife had hired forensic accountants who'd traced Whitmore's lottery ticket purchases over the past year. They found that Whitmore had a pattern of buying large numbers of tickets, checking them immediately, and then claiming the non-winning tickets on his taxes as gambling losses. But there's no record of him buying tickets at any of the locations he claimed during the time period when your winning ticket was sold. The evidence suggested Whitmore had fabricated his purchase records, possibly buying tickets at different times and backdating receipts to match. His wife's lawyers are arguing that Whitmore committed fraud in the lottery dispute, which means he committed fraud against her by hiding a marital asset. They're asking for a full forensic accounting of all his finances. The revelation was devastating for Whitmore. Within a month, additional evidence emerged that he'd bribed the Shell station owner to start the fire that destroyed the purchase records, hoping to make it impossible for me to prove where I'd bought my ticket. The station owner, facing arson charges, had cooperated with prosecutors and provided recorded conversations where Whitmore had offered him $50,000 to have an electrical problem. Whitmore was arrested on charges of arson conspiracy, insurance fraud, and perjury. His legal team scrambled to work out a plea deal, and part of that deal involved dropping all appeals of the lottery verdict and admitting that his theft claim had been fabricated. 8 months after I'd scanned that ticket, the Lottery Commission finally released the funds. $10 million, minus taxes and legal fees, still left me with enough to change my life completely. Keller took his contingency fee, which was substantial but fair, given that he'd saved me from prison. Detective Chen closed her investigation with a report that noted how close the justice system had come to failing me simply because I was poor and my accuser was wealthy. If Whitmore's wife hadn't hired those forensic accountants, if the station owner hadn't cracked under pressure, you might never have been able to prove your innocence, she told me during our final meeting. The realization was sobering. I'd been one break away from losing everything, and the only reason I'd won was because Whitmore's greed had extended beyond just stealing my ticket. I quit my construction job the day the money hit my account, and for the first few weeks I just existed in a state of surreal disbelief. I paid off my debts, bought a modest house, invested most of the money on Keller's advice. Rachel called to congratulate me, and we had a long conversation about what might have been if I'd won the lottery while we were still married. "You know this doesn't change anything between us," she said gently. "We divorced because we wanted different things, not because you were poor." I knew she was right, but part of me wondered if the financial security would have saved our marriage. I'd never know, and I was learning to be okay with that.